they'll win this series. They should win this series in 5 back home in Indiana. And then it's going to be the questions as far as with Milwaukee, kind of what's next. I wrote their offseason article after they were down 2-0. Went back last night and certainly changed some things around because of the Lillard injury, which looks like it's going to be an Achilles. And an Achilles for a player who will be 35 years old in summer and is owed $113 million left. And the future, even without the injury, did not look great for Milwaukee. And it's a lesson that eventually championship windows and the cycle to compete for championships eventually come to an end. That is the reality. That's in every sport. They've been to the playoffs 9 years in a row. They've lost. They'll probably lose in the playoffs 3 years in a row. They haven't been healthy. That's the reality of it, whether it be Giannis or Lillard or Middleton before that. But when you look at the big picture of this roster and you've got free agents, Lopez, Trent Jr., Taurean Prince, Bobby Portis, Kevin Porter Jr., the list goes on. Where are reinforcements coming from? You make the Kyle Kuzma trade. Where are reinforcements coming from? You can't trade a first round pick until 2031. You have basically 2 seconds at all. You have one this year. Where's help coming from? And they are ultimately aggressive. John Horst, their GM, has been aggressive forever, consistently turning over the roster, looking to, as I said, extending the Giannis window. I just look at it and it's like basically time will eventually run out here. And then that leads you to the big question with Giannis. I mean, that's the reality of it as far as a guy that's got, I think, 3 years left on his contract, third year's a player option as far as what you do with him. Because if Lillard is not going to be able to come back until, I don't even know if he comes back at all next year with that injury. That's a tough one. What's the roster looking like? And what happened, CP, is, and I dealt with this in New Jersey for the years we went to the playoffs and the finals, is when you don't draft well or if you don't have your picks and your players start to get older, like your wave of young players better help you.
Right.
Look at their wave of young players, and yeah, AJ Green's a nice player, right? Come off, but what else you got, man?
Yeah.
I mean, we had Ryan Rollins starting, who was basically on a two-way to start the, we don't see Andre Jackson or Chris Livingston or any of those guys they've drafted before. And Connaughton and, Jericho Sims and like that group there. It's like, what else do you have to that roster? And there's going to be some hard questions as far as what they have to kind of talk about when their offseason begins.
It seems like, I mean, not seems like, I think they have to trade Giannis, but what do you think in the minds of their GM? Because I feel like a guy like a Danny Ainge, he pulled the trigger. He's
Sure.
moving this guy and starting over.
Yeah.
What do you make of the Bucks GM's mindset there?
It's hard. I mean, listen, if it was Nico Harrison, he would
Oh yeah, yeah. He'd be gone already
you
years
have
ago.
to know the pulse of the timeline of when things are ending. Danny Ainge did it brilliantly in Boston with Pierce and Garnett, right? But certainly what the return value was able to do. Sam Presti is terrific at that. There basically is an alarm clock that goes off in his brain that says we need to move Paul George. We see where this roster is going. We can't compete for a championship. I need to move Paul George, and maybe I can get back Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and 5 firsts for him. And that starts the retool. I think the biggest thing is if you're going to do it, you can't just rely just on draft picks. You got to get a centerpiece of a player that you can kind of because draft picks are draft picks. Like
Right.
you can, like even like in the Bridges trade with Brooklyn, like one of them is going to be the 26th pick in the draft. Who knows where? Like maybe the one in 30 turns out, or 29 turns out to be pretty good. But they're just picks, right? Like they're. So with Giannis in Milwaukee, and if you have that hard decision, and eventually you figure out this is the best for the organization, this is the best for him. You'll have offers. You'll have significant offers here for teams willing to give a ton. You'll get more than what Dallas got for Luka, I'm sure. But that's something that you have to realize. Like, do we think we have another rabbit out of the hat? Or do we think the ATM machine is low on money?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hard thing for front offices to answer.
Who do you think? Because I look at some of these young teams. I look at the Rockets. I look at Detroit. Who do you think makes the most sense to cash some of those chips in the middle and go get them? He always talks about he wants to win. He wants to stay in that championship window. That's why when people say, Brooklyn is the favorite, I just can't
Yeah.
see it. I mean, I don't
Well,
see who they pair him with.
I think Brooklyn is just linked because they just have so many draft
Right,
picks.
right, right.
Like, and so if you're Giannis, you're like, well, wait a minute. Like the biggest thing when franchise players get traded is walking into a roster that's already like depleted. You're like, great, like that sounds good. It's like, I'm here, but who am I playing with?
Yeah.
Like, what's the plan here? And if you give up all your draft picks, that's fine, but you're probably going to have to cost you Cam Johnson or Nick Claxton, some of those players here. I think I think Houston for me, and it's even with Durant, who
Mm-hmm.
will be likely become available. Like Houston has a little bit of everything. Like they've got
Mm-hmm.
young players, they got draft picks. You can still trade guys and still have stuff left. Like so if you're trading, I don't know, Jalen Green or Jabari Smith or Reed Shepard and draft picks, they've got a ton of picks. You still have um,
Sengun.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
Goon and Thompson, and we'll see what happens with Dylan Brooks. And there's still enough left. There's still enough left to the roster
Mm-hmm.
here, as far as how you want to build up. So it's not completely gutted. Detroit is interesting for me because we kind of get into this pattern where sometimes continuity bites you in the butt a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw it with Atlanta when they went to the conference finals and lost to Milwaukee that
Milwaukee.
year. They
Yeah.
basically ran it back, right? They ran it back, and then now you get stuck. Now Detroit is interesting because your three out of your four veterans, Schroeder, Hardaway, and Beasley are free agents.
Mm.
So what do you do with them, right? Do you want to bring it back, and does this roster have the upside to
Right.
take it to the next step here? But they're flushed with draft picks, and they've got young players to potentially move in a deal here, and that's why I love the playoffs because the playoffs are always makes someone have a knee-jerk
Mm.
reaction to when you lose early
Mm-hmm.
when you think maybe you're a little bit better, whether it be the Rockets who maybe they got to go out and get Durant because they don't have a closer on this roster, or maybe they think they have to go get Giannis because there is no franchise level player on this roster here.